I'm Hazel Mitchell, 28 years old, and my phone won't stop buzzing. 3 months ago, I moved to a new city and a new apartment. Not a single family member noticed or cared, until today. My Aunt Patricia just posted a charity event photo with my building visible in the background. Now my notifications are exploding with messages from relatives I haven't heard from in months. The most surprising? A text from my mother. "Darling, when were you going to tell us about your fancy new place? Something doesn't feel right about this sudden interest in my life." Before I dive into this wild story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever felt invisible to your own family, and subscribe to join our community of survivors. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how I handled what came next. Growing up in Boston's affluent Beacon Hill neighborhood, I never lacked material things. Our brownstone was featured in home magazines, and my parents threw parties that made the society pages. But underneath the polished exterior was a family where I never quite belonged. My mother, Diane Mitchell, was the quintessential socialite, perfect hair, perfect clothes, perfect smile that never quite reached her eyes. She measured worth in connections and appearances. My father, Lawrence, was a corporate attorney who worked 70 hours a week and communicated primarily through his assistant, or my mother. When he was home, he was physically present but mentally elsewhere, constantly on calls or checking emails. The family hierarchy was established early. My older brother Ryan was the golden child, Harvard Business School graduate, following in our father's footsteps. Every achievement was celebrated, every failure minimized. My older sister Jessica was the beauty, the homecoming queen whose wedding was featured in Boston Magazine. And then there was Tyler, the baby of the family, 7 years younger than me, who could do no wrong. And me? I was the forgotten middle child, not academic enough to compete with Ryan, not pretty enough to compete with Jessica, not young enough to be doted on like Tyler. I was the one whose school events were missed because of important commitments, whose achievements were acknowledged with distracted nods. Hazel? Oh, she's doing fine. She's always been so independent, my mother would tell her friends, reframing her neglect as some kind of virtue on my part. Our family operated on a currency of favors and appearances. Connections were cultivated not for friendship, but for what could be gained. Family gatherings were performances where everyone played their assigned roles, and deviation was met with subtle but cutting remarks. The only person who occasionally showed genuine interest in my life was Aunt Patricia, my father's sister. She would ask about my interests, remember details about my friends, send birthday cards with thoughtful notes. But even Patricia was entrenched in the family's value system, ultimately loyal to the Mitchell name above all else. Last December, after being passed over for a promotion I had worked tirelessly for, I made a decision. My supervisor had pulled me aside with sympathetic eyes. "You're the most qualified, Hazel." But they went with Greg because of his connections. The familiar sting of being overlooked hit harder than usual. That night, I applied for jobs in Chicago, a city I'd visited once and loved, far from Boston and the shadow of my family. When I received an offer from a marketing firm in Chicago with a modest but adequate salary, I accepted immediately. I found an apartment in a renovated building that was part of a city development initiative, modern and stylish, but actually affordable through the program. I packed my life into boxes, hired movers, and left. I didn't hide my move. I just didn't announce it. I updated my address, filed my change of residence, and switched my utilities. I mentioned it casually to Aunt Patricia during our monthly phone call, but I didn't make a social media announcement or send out a family email. I was curious. How long would it take for my family to notice I had left the city? Would anyone care enough to ask where I'd gone? The answer was 3 months of silence. Not a single call asking why I'd missed Sunday dinner. Not one text wondering why I wasn't at my cousin's baby shower. No emails questioning my absence from the family group chat. Just confirmation of what I'd always felt. In the Mitchell family, I was essentially invisible. Until today. The first notification came at 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday while I was in a meeting. A tag from Aunt Patricia on Instagram. I ignored it until my lunch break, expecting it to be another of her charity galas where she tagged everyone she knew for maximum exposure. When I finally checked, my stomach dropped. There was Aunt Patricia in her designer dress, champagne flute in hand, posing in front of a window at the Chicago Arts Foundation benefit. And clearly visible through that window, across the street, was my apartment building with its distinctive blue-tinted glass balconies and geometric facade. The caption read, "Wonderful evening supporting young artists. Chicago Arts Charity Mitchell Family Values." I zoomed in on the image, hoping I was mistaken. But there was no doubt. That was the south-facing side of my building, the one with the rooftop garden I could see from my bedroom window. Before I could process this, my phone started buzzing incessantly. First came a text from my mother. "Darling, when were you going to tell us about your fancy new place? Your father and I are so curious about your sudden upgrade. Dinner soon?" Then my brother Ryan. "Sis, nice digs. Did you finally catch a break? Or is there a rich boyfriend we don't know about?" Jessica followed, "Oh my God, you live in the Westwood Plaza? Those units start at like $800 Kelvins. We need to talk as soon as possible." Even my father, who typically communicated through my mother, sent a direct message. "Hazel, please call when convenient to discuss your new living situation." By evening, I had received messages from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, my mother's sister, whom I barely knew, and even my father's business partners, all suddenly interested in my life, all focused on one thing. How could plain, unremarkable Hazel Mitchell afford to live in what they perceived as a luxury building? The reality was, my apartment was part of Chicago's urban development initiative that set aside 30% of units in new buildings for middle-income residents at controlled rates. My one-bedroom apartment cost less than my cramped studio in Boston had. But from the outside, with its modern architecture and prime location, the building screamed wealth. I called Aunt Patricia, the only family member I somewhat trusted, to understand how this had happened. "Oh, Hazel, dear, I had no idea that was your building until after I posted," she said, her voice carrying that familiar Mitchell tone of superficial warmth. "But isn't it wonderful that everyone's taking an interest in your life now? It's strange, considering no one noticed I'd even left Boston for 3 months." I replied, a pause. "Well, you know how busy everyone is, and you've always been so independent." That familiar phrase again, my alleged independence, the family's convenient excuse for neglect. "Patricia, why is everyone so interested in my apartment specifically? Mom asked about a sudden upgrade, and Jessica thinks I bought an $800,000 condo." Another pause, longer this time. "Well, you know how the family is about appearances. Everyone's just surprised that that I'm what? That you seem to be doing so well financially. It's not what anyone expected for you." The implications stung. Of all the Mitchell children, I was the only one they expected to fail. Then Patricia said something that made my blood run cold. "Your mother mentioned she's organizing a little family reunion at your new place. Isn't that thoughtful of her? Everyone's so eager to see how you're doing now, that you're successful." After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone as more notifications arrived. Second cousins, family, friends, all suddenly remembering my existence. The pattern was clear. They thought I had money, and now I was worth their time. I scrolled back through months of family posts and messages, holiday gatherings I hadn't been invited to, celebrations I'd only learned about through social media, group chats that had fallen silent for me. 3 months of my absence completely unremarked upon. That night, I received an email from my mother with the subject line, "Family Reunion Plans, Your Apartment, Next Weekend." She hadn't asked if I was available or willing. In typical Diane Mitchell fashion, she had simply decided. As I lay in bed that night, a sickening realization dawned. Aunt Patricia had known exactly what she was doing when she posted that photo. Her mistake had been deliberate, the first betrayal in what would become many. The aunt I thought cared about me, even a little, had just thrown me to the wolves. My mother's email laid out her plan with military precision. "We'll arrive Friday evening around 6 p.m. Your father has a morning meeting in Chicago anyway, so it works perfectly. Jessica and David will bring the children. Ryan is flying in specially. Tyler may bring a guest. I've invited Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert, plus cousins Melanie and Thomas with their spouses. Do make sure you have adequate sleeping accommodations or suggest nearby hotels of appropriate quality. I'll handle the catering, of course. No question if I was available. No request for permission. just the assumption that my home and life were at her disposal. Classic Diane Mitchell. My first instinct was to reply with a firm no. But years of family conditioning kicked in. The fear of confrontation, the ingrained need to please, the certainty that boundaries would be ignored anyway. Instead, I called my friend Amelia, the one person who truly knew what my family was like. "They're going to invade whether you want them to or not," Amelia said after I explained the situation. "But this time, you can control the narrative. Let them come, but on your terms." "What do you mean?" "They're coming because they think you've suddenly become wealthy, right? They want something from you. So decide what you're willing to give. Your time, maybe, but not your peace of mind. Set boundaries and stick to them." That night, I drafted my response to my mother. "Mom, I can host a small gathering on Saturday afternoon only. I have work commitments Friday and Sunday. The apartment is a one-bedroom, so everyone will need to book hotels. I'd appreciate a list of who's actually coming so I can prepare accordingly." Her reply was immediate. "Darling, don't be difficult. Everyone is making such an effort to see you. We'll work around your schedule for Friday. But Sunday brunch is non-negotiable." 3 more emails followed, each eroding my boundaries until I found myself agreeing to a Saturday gathering extending into Sunday just for immediate family. The pattern was so familiar I could have scripted it. The week before their arrival, I cleaned my apartment obsessively while rehearsing responses to the questions I knew would come. "No, I didn't receive an inheritance. No, I don't have a secret wealthy boyfriend. Yes, I can afford this place on my salary because of a housing program." I prepared for the investigation I knew would ensue. My mother examining labels on my clothes, my father assessing the building's security features, my siblings looking for signs of financial prosperity to report back. 2 days before their arrival, I met my neighbor Brett while collecting packages in the lobby. When I mentioned the impending family invasion, his eyes widened. "My family's the same way," he said. "Only interested when they think there's something to gain. Need reinforcements?" His offer was casual but sincere, and I found myself accepting. "Actually, yes. If you hear furniture being thrown on Saturday, please knock with some invented emergency." Brett laughed. "I can do better than that. I'll bring over my famous bourbon pecan pie around 4 p.m. when family gatherings typically hit peak tension. You can introduce me as your neighbor who happens to be a lawyer." "Are you a lawyer?" I asked. "Corporate counsel for a tech company," he confirmed. Nothing scares off opportunistic relatives faster than someone who understands financial law. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt like I might have an ally. The day before their arrival, my sister Jessica called. "So level with me," she said without preamble. "How did you afford this place? Mom's convinced you've been holding out on the family." "Holding out what?" "You know." Her voice lowered conspiratorially. "The money. From Grandma Sarah." "What money from Grandma Sarah?" "She left her collection of first edition books, which Mom gave to Ryan." Jessica's pause was telling. "Oh, I thought you knew. Never mind. See you tomorrow." She hung up before I could press further, leaving me with a new mystery. What money from my grandmother? She had died 3 years ago, with what the family had described as modest savings after medical expenses. As I made up the sofa bed and purchased extra towels for my unwanted guests, a suspicion began forming. Perhaps there was more to my family's sudden interest than just appearances. Perhaps they thought I had discovered something they had kept hidden from me. And for the first time, I began to wonder if their arrival was not just annoying, but potentially dangerous. They arrived like an invading army, my mother first, air-kissing my cheeks while her eyes cataloged every item in my apartment. My father on his phone discussing a merger, Ryan checking his reflection in my hallway mirror, Jessica directing her husband David where to place their designer luggage as if they were checking into a hotel rather than visiting for an afternoon. "Hazel, darling, what a quaint little place," my mother said, emphasizing little in a way that somehow made it sound like a moral failing on my part. "Though the building itself is quite impressive, your father's colleague, Bill Thompson, developed a similar property in Boston. Tremendously profitable investment." Before I could respond, she was opening my refrigerator, frowning at its contents. "We'll need to order in." "I see. nothing suitable for proper entertaining. My apartment, which had felt spacious and perfectly adequate for one person, suddenly seemed cramped and insufficient under my mother's critical gaze. Jessica's twins immediately started touching everything, their sticky fingers reaching for my laptop and work files. "Children, remember what we discussed about respecting other people's things," Jessica said, without actually stopping them. Within 30 minutes, my mother had rearranged my living room furniture to create better flow. My father had commandeered my desk for just a few important calls, and Ryan was loudly critiquing my choice of neighborhood to anyone who would listen. "It's an up-and-coming area," he explained to my cousin Melanie's husband, as if I wasn't standing right there. "Smart investment if she got in early enough, though not where I'd choose to live personally. Too urban." Cousin Melanie herself was less subtle. She wandered through my apartment, taking photos for inspiration, but was clearly documenting everything I owned for family discussion later. "Is this West Elm?" she asked, pointing to my coffee table. "Or a reproduction?" "It's secondhand," I replied, watching her expression shift to poorly disguised disdain. Aunt Patricia arrived with Uncle Robert, greeting me with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Hazel, we're all so proud of you. This building is absolutely prestigious. You must be doing incredibly well." Her eyes darted around, looking for signs of the wealth she clearly expected to see. The interrogation began over lunch, catered by my mother, who had deemed my kitchen inadequate for proper food preparation. "So, Hazel," my father began in his deposition voice, "tell us about this sudden change in lifestyle. New job? New relationship?" The way he said relationship made it sound like he was asking if I'd joined a cult. "Neither," I replied. "Same job, just transferred to the Chicago office. The apartment is part of an affordable housing initiative." "Affordable?" My mother nearly choked on her sparkling water. "This building. Don't be absurd." "It's true, Mom. 30% of the units are set aside for middle-income residents." My explanation was met with skeptical glances. No one in my family could comprehend choosing an apartment based on affordability rather than status. "Well, however you managed it, we're all just so pleased to see you settling in properly," Aunt Patricia said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Everyone was quite concerned when you just disappeared from Boston." "I didn't disappear. I moved. I told you, Patricia, during our monthly call." An uncomfortable silence fell, as everyone realized they'd been exposed. No one had noticed my absence because no one had tried to contact me. The afternoon progressed with increasing tension. My mother inspected my closet under the guise of helping organize your limited space, darling. Jessica cornered me in the kitchen to ask if I'd had work done because I somehow looked different. Tyler, who had arrived late with a girlfriend I'd never heard of, immediately asked if he could crash at my place whenever, since I had all this space now. The first major confrontation came when I walked into my bedroom to find Ryan rifling through my desk drawer. "What are you doing?" I demanded. He didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. "Just looking for a pen, sis. Though I did notice your bank statements. Pretty healthy savings for someone on your salary. Finally, learning to manage money. Or is there something you're not telling the family?" I snatched the drawer shut, nearly catching his fingers. "My finances are none of your business. Get out of my bedroom." "No need to be defensive," he said with that smug smile I'd grown to hate. "Unless you're hiding something? Like, oh, I don't know, Grandma Sarah's money?" And there it was. The real reason for this family invasion. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "Oh, come on, Hazel. We all know you were Grandma's favorite. She must have left you something on the side. And now suddenly you're living in a building like this? The timing is interesting." Before I could respond, my mother called everyone to the dining area for cake. But Ryan's accusation hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Dinner was the final straw. My father cleared his throat in that way that always preceded a family announcement. "Since we're all together, this seems like an appropriate time to discuss family finances," he began. "As you all know, the Mitchell Family Trust is structured to benefit all members equally. However, recent medical expenses for your grandfather and the unfortunate market downturn have created some temporary liquidity issues." My mother jumped in seamlessly. "What your father is saying, children, is that we all need to contribute to support the family infrastructure during this challenging time. Ryan has already pledged a significant portion of his year-end bonus. Jessica and David are handling the educational expenses for your cousins. All eyes turned to me. The setup was obvious now. They thought I had money, and they had come to claim it. We thought, my father continued, given your apparent financial improvement, you might want to contribute to the family fund as well. Say, $50,000 as an initial commitment? The room fell silent. $50,000, more than my entire year's salary. I don't have that kind of money, I said flatly. Hazel, my mother used her don't embarrass me voice. There's no need to be selfish. We're all aware of your inheritance. What inheritance? From Sarah, my father said impatiently. Your grandmother. I didn't receive anything from Grandma Sarah except her old recipe box, which Mom said was worthless and threw away. My parents exchanged glances. My siblings suddenly became very interested in their dessert plates. That's not possible, my mother said. You must have received the letter from the executor. I never received any letter. Another loaded glance between my parents. My father cleared his throat again. Well, this is all very confusing. Perhaps we should discuss it another time. But it was too late. The truth was beginning to crystallize in my mind. There had been an inheritance. My family knew about it. And for some reason, they had kept it from me. I think I said, standing up, this family reunion is over. After everyone left, with much protest and my mother's parting shot of, we're only trying to help you manage money, you clearly don't understand, I spent the night researching my grandmother's estate. Sarah Mitchell had been my father's mother, a quiet, dignified woman who had shown me more affection than my parents ever had. She taught me to bake, sent me handwritten letters when I went to college, and never once compared me to my siblings. When she died 3 years ago, the family gathering had been brief, businesslike. My father, as executor, had handled everything. We were told she had left specific bequests, her books to Ryan, her jewelry to Jessica, her china to Tyler, and her sentimental items of minimal value to me. I'd received a recipe box and a well-worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, both of which my mother had dismissed as cluttering up the house during spring cleaning. But something about my family's reaction tonight suggested there was more to the story. I started with a simple Google search of my grandmother's name and estate. Nothing. Then I tried the county probate records, which were partially available online. After an hour of searching, I found it, Estate of Sarah Eleanor Mitchell. But the records were sealed. At 7 a.m., I called the family lawyer, Gregory Winters, who had handled our family's legal matters for decades. His secretary initially refused to schedule an appointment until I mentioned it concerned discrepancies in Sarah Mitchell's estate distribution. Within minutes, Gregory himself called back and agreed to see me that afternoon. His office was exactly as I remembered. Wood-paneled, leather-bound law books lining the walls, diplomas, and family photos arranged precisely on his desk. Gregory himself looked older, more tired than I recalled. Hazel, it's been some time, he greeted me with a firm handshake. You're looking well. Chicago must agree with you. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. He gestured to the chair across from him. Your call raised some concerns. You mentioned Sarah's estate? Yes. My family visited yesterday and seemed to believe I had received a substantial inheritance from my grandmother. This was news to me. Gregory's expression remained neutral, but I noticed his hand tighten slightly around his pen. I see. And what exactly did they say? They implied I had hidden money from the family. They specifically mentioned Grandma Sarah's money and seemed to think I'd used it to buy an expensive apartment. Gregory sighed deeply and removed his glasses. Hazel, I find myself in a difficult position. As your family's attorney, there are confidentiality issues to consider. However, as the executor of Sarah's estate, I also have a fiduciary duty to ensure her wishes were carried out properly. Were they? He hesitated. No, they were not. My heart pounded as he opened a drawer and removed a thick file. Your grandmother was a shrewd investor. The family knew about her blue-chip stocks and real estate holdings. What they didn't know, what she kept private until her will was read, was her additional portfolio of tech investments made in the early 2000s. Those investments performed exceptionally well. How well? Sarah's estate was valued at approximately $12 million. I nearly choked. $12 million? Yes. After taxes, Approximately $8 million remained for distribution. He flipped through the file. According to her will, the estate was to be divided equally among her 4 grandchildren: Ryan, Jessica, yourself, and Tyler, approximately $2 million each, with specific items bequeathed as mentioned in the family meeting. My mind reeled. $2 million. And I had received a recipe box. I never received any notification about this. Gregory looked deeply uncomfortable. The notifications were sent to the addresses on file. Yours was your parents' home address, as you were between apartments at the time. All beneficiaries were required to sign acknowledgement of the bequest before funds could be distributed. He pulled out a document. This is your acknowledgement, purportedly signed by you, notarized, and returned to this office. He pushed the paper across the desk. There, at the bottom, was my signature, or rather, a reasonable facsimile. Close, but with subtle differences someone who didn't look at my signature daily wouldn't notice. That's not my signature. I was afraid you might say that. Gregory removed his glasses again, suddenly looking every day of his 60-plus years. Hazel, what I'm about to tell you is deeply troubling and potentially criminal. After receiving your call, I pulled the transaction records for your portion of the estate. The $2 million designated for you was transferred to a trust account. From there, it was distributed to several investment accounts over a 6-month period. Accounts in my name? No. The accounts were under the control of Mitchell Family Holdings, a corporate entity managed by your father. The room seemed to tilt slightly. My father stole my inheritance. Stole is a legal conclusion I'm not prepared to make at this time, but the facts suggest your inheritance was diverted without your knowledge or consent. Yes, with a forged signature. That appears to be the case. And you, as executor, didn't verify this with me personally? You just accepted a document with a signature that doesn't match my legal signature on other documents you have on file? Gregory had the decency to look ashamed. The notarization appeared legitimate. The Mitchell family has been my client for 30 years. I had no reason to suspect impropriety. No reason, except ethics and legal obligation, I said, my voice rising. What about the letter I supposedly received? Who signed for that? He checked the file again. The certified letter was signed for by Diane Mitchell, my mother. Of course. So my parents intercepted my legal notification, forged my signature, and stole $2 million from me. And you, as executor, allowed it to happen. Hazel, I understand you're upset. Upset? I'm way beyond upset. I want copies of everything in that file. The will, the distribution records, the forged documents, everything. And then I want to know what you intend to do to rectify this situation. 2 hours later, I left Gregory's office with a USB drive containing scans of the entire file and his assurance that he would look into the matter urgently. His parting words stayed with me. Hazel, be careful. Financial matters can bring out the worst in families. Too late for that warning. At home, I spread the documents across my dining table. Incontrovertible evidence of my family's betrayal. The will clearly naming me as a beneficiary. The forged acknowledgement with its notary stamp from a service my mother frequently used. Bank records showing the systematic draining of my inheritance into family account. And perhaps most painful of all, a handwritten letter from my grandmother that had been included with the will but never delivered to me. My dearest Hazel, you have always been the quiet strength of this family, though few have recognized it. This money comes with no strings, no expectations, only my hope that it helps you build the life you choose, not the one others choose for you. You are so much more than they see. All my love, Grandma Sarah. I sobbed as I read her words. The validation and love I'd always craved, stolen along with the money. As I collected myself, my phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Patricia. Hazel, dear, I hope you're not upset about yesterday. Everyone was just concerned about you. By the way, I've always wondered, did you ever receive anything from your grandmother besides that old recipe box? The betrayal cut deep. Even Patricia, the one family member I thought cared about me, had been part of the conspiracy. She had known all along. Her accidental photo of my building, her sudden interest in my finances, it had all been calculated to determine if I had discovered the theft. As I stared at her message, another text arrived, this one from my mother. Your father and I are very disappointed in your behavior yesterday. Family helps family, Hazel. We expect better from you. Call when you're ready to discuss your contribution. The audacity was breathtaking. They had stolen $2 million from me and were now demanding I contribute more. In that moment, something broke inside me. The last shred of hope that my family might someday value me, see me, love me. But something else formed in its place, a determination I'd never felt before. They thought I was the weak one, the forgettable one, the one they could steal from with impunity. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The next morning, I woke to an email from my company's HR department requesting an urgent meeting regarding concerns about your well-being. When I arrived at work, my manager Sarah and the HR director were waiting, their expressions grave. Hazel, we've received some concerning information about your personal situation. The HR director began carefully. Your brother Ryan contacted us yesterday. He indicated that the family has serious concerns about your mental health and financial decision-making capacity. I stared at them in disbelief. My brother contacted my workplace? Sarah looked uncomfortable. He said you've been experiencing episodes of paranoia, specifically delusions about family members stealing from you. He mentioned your family visited this weekend and became alarmed at your behavior. The speed with which my family had moved from invasion to attack was stunning. They weren't just trying to gaslight me. They were actively working to discredit me before I could expose their theft. Ryan has no medical expertise, no legal authority over me, and frankly, no concern for my well-being, I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. This is a personal family matter that has nothing to do with my work performance. Fortunately, Sarah had always appreciated my work ethic. Hazel has shown no concerning behaviors here, she assured the HR director. In fact, her performance review last month was exemplary. After providing reassurances that I was perfectly stable, I left the meeting shaking with anger and called Gregory Winters. They're moving faster than I anticipated, he said after I explained what happened. This suggests they're worried you've discovered the truth. I've begun preparing documentation for potential legal proceedings. But Hazel, you should be prepared. This will likely get worse before it gets better. He was right. That evening, my sister Jessica showed up at my apartment unannounced with a man she introduced as Charles Beckman, financial advisor. We're worried about you, Hazel, Jessica said, pushing past me into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. The family thinks you need help managing your finances. Charles has helped all of us with investment strategies. Charles handed me a business card from a firm I'd never heard of and immediately began asking intrusive questions about my bank accounts, investment portfolio, and retirement savings. When I refused to provide any information, Jessica pulled me aside. Don't be difficult, she hissed. Charles can help transfer your assets into the family trust for management. It's for your own protection. Protection from what, exactly? From yourself. Look, we all know you've never been good with money. If you've somehow gotten hold of Grandma's money, you'll just waste it on whatever all this is. She gestured dismissively around my apartment. I think you should leave, I said, opening the door. Both of you. Charles stepped closer, his smile not reaching his eyes. Miss Mitchell, your family is trying to help. I just need you to sign these simple authorization forms. He pulled papers from his briefcase. Standard procedure. I glanced at the document titles. Power of attorney forms and account transfer authorizations. They weren't just trying to find out if I knew about the money. They were actively trying to gain control of any assets I might have. After physically escorting them out and double-locking my door, I received an email notification that someone had created a GoFundMe campaign titled Help for Hazel, Mental Health Recovery Fund. My cousin Melanie had started it, complete with a photo of me taken without permission during the family visit. The description claimed I was struggling with severe paranoia and financial instability and needed funds for appropriate treatment. I reported the campaign immediately, but the message was clear. My family was systematically working to paint me as mentally unstable. The next blow came 2 days later. A certified letter informing me that my parents had filed for emergency temporary guardianship over me, claiming I was unable to manage personal affairs due to mental illness manifesting as paranoid delusions about financial matters. A court date had been set for the following month, They were actually trying to have me legally declared incompetent. When I called Gregory in a panic, his response was measured but concerned. They're escalating because they're afraid. This filing is premature and unlikely to succeed, but it shows how far they're willing to go. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every noise in the hallway made me jump. What else were they planning? How far would they go to silence me? The answer came the next day when I returned from work to find my apartment door slightly ajar, my heart pounding. I called building security before entering. Together, we discovered my apartment had been meticulously searched, drawers gently rifled through, computer moved, files disturbed. Nothing appeared to be stolen, but the message was clear. Nowhere was safe. The security officer pointed out something I'd missed. A tiny device tucked behind my living room curtain. A listening bug. We found 2 more, one in my bedroom and another near my dining table where I'd spread out the inheritance documents. They hadn't just invaded my space. They'd been monitoring my conversations. How long had they been listening? What had they heard? My conversation with Gregory? My calls to the bank? My tearful breakdown after reading my grandmother's letter? The violation was profound. In my own home, in my private moments, they had been there, listening, gathering information to use against me. The security footage showed a cleaning service entering my apartment, a service I had never hired. When contacted, the company confirmed they had been booked by a family member who claimed to be arranging a surprise cleaning for me. That night, I met Brett and Amelia at a coffee shop several blocks from my apartment, convinced my family might be watching my building. "You need to go to the police," Amelia insisted after I explained everything. With what? A family disagreement over an inheritance? A break-in where nothing was stolen? They'll say it's a civil matter. The bugs are illegal, Brett pointed out. That's criminal invasion of privacy. But proving who placed them would be nearly impossible. The cleaning service was paid in cash. We strategized for hours, considering my options. I could fight the guardianship petition, pursue criminal charges for the forgery, file a civil lawsuit for the stolen inheritance. All lengthy, expensive processes that would drain me emotionally and financially. "There's another option," Brett said finally. "You could give them what they want." "What? Give up?" "No. Make them think you're giving up. If they believe you're broken, compliant, they'll let their guard down. Meanwhile, you gather evidence, build your case quietly." It was manipulative, calculating. Everything I'd hated about my family's tactics. But I was beginning to realize that playing by the rules against people who ignored them entirely was a losing strategy. The next day, Amelia called me during lunch. "Hazel, I hate to tell you this, but your mother just called me. She said she's been trying to reach you and is worried." "My mother called you? How does she even have your number?" "That's the thing. She shouldn't. I've never met your mother. But she knew all about me, our friendship, even where I work." The implications were chilling. They were investigating my friends now. "What did she want?" "Information about you." She was very smooth about it, all concern and family love. But she was fishing for anything she could use. Asked if you'd been acting strangely or making accusations. I didn't tell her anything, but Hazel. It was creepy how much she already knew about me. After we hung up, I sat frozen in my office. The walls were closing in. My family was monitoring my conversations, investigating my friends, trying to have me declared incompetent, and actively working to turn my colleagues against me. That afternoon, I lost my first client. The official reason was restructuring, but the account manager let slip that there had been concerns raised about account management stability. Someone had gotten to them, planting doubts about my reliability. As I walked home that evening, I noticed a car that seemed to be following me, staying half a block behind, turning when I turned. Paranoia or reality? At this point, I couldn't tell the difference. For the first time, I truly understood what I was up against. This wasn't just about money. This was about control. My family had created a narrative about who I was. The unstable one, the incompetent one, the one who needed management, and they would stop at nothing to maintain it. And then came the final betrayal. I met Amelia for dinner at a small restaurant we often frequented, needing a friendly face and supportive ear. Throughout the meal, she seemed distracted, checking her phone frequently. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine, just work stuff," she replied, too quickly. As we finished dessert, she excused herself to the restroom. Her phone, left on the table, lit up with a text message. I wouldn't have looked except for the name that appeared on the screen. Diane Mitchell, my mother. The message preview was brief but devastating. Did she mention the lawyer? Details, please. Amelia, my closest friend, the person I had trusted with everything, was reporting to my mother. How long had this been happening? Had anything in our friendship been genuine? When she returned to the table, I was already gathering my things. You're working with my family, I said flatly. Her face crumpled. Hazel, it's not what you think. They approached me months ago, before you even moved. They were concerned about you, and I thought I was helping by spying on me, by reporting my private conversations to my mother. At first, I just told them you were fine. But then they started offering to help with my student loans, and she trailed off, unable to meet my eyes. They bought you, just like they try to buy everyone. I never meant to hurt you. I care about you, Hazel, really. But you have to understand, your family is powerful, connected. When people like that offer help, it's hard to say no. I left without another word. Another piece of my world shattered. If they could turn Amelia, who else? How many people in my life were actually informants for my family? That night, alone in my apartment that no longer felt like a sanctuary, I reached my breaking point. Tears gave way to something colder, harder, a clarity I'd never experienced before. My family had taken so much from me, my inheritance, my security, my friend, nearly my reputation and freedom, but they had miscalculated badly. They thought their pressure would break me, force me to comply. Instead, it had burned away the last traces of the dutiful daughter who sought their approval. In her place stood someone new, someone who was done playing by their rules. I picked up my phone and called Brett. I need your help. It's time to fight back. My first call the next morning wasn't to Gregory Winters. Despite his apparent willingness to help, he had been my family's attorney for decades. His loyalty was suspect. Instead, I called Maria Santos, a litigator known for taking on powerful families in inheritance disputes. Her office was smaller than Gregory's, her furniture less imposing, but her reputation was fierce. Let me be clear, she said after I explained my situation. You're alleging that your family forged your signature, diverted a $2 million inheritance without your knowledge, and is now attempting to have you declared incompetent to prevent you from reclaiming it. Yes. And they've bugged my apartment, followed me, interfered with my employment, and turned my best friend into an informant. Instead of the skepticism I expected, Maria smiled grimly. You'd be surprised how common this is. Not the specifics, but the pattern. Wealthy families will go to extraordinary lengths to control money and maintain power dynamics. Can you help me? Yes, but you need to understand something. Your family has resources, connections, and apparently no ethical boundaries. This won't be quick or easy. The courts move slowly, and they'll delay at every opportunity. What do I do in the meantime? They're escalating their attempts to discredit me. Maria leaned forward. We fight on two fronts. Legally, we challenge the guardianship petition and prepare a civil case for the stolen inheritance. But simultaneously, we play a different game. We make them think they're winning while we gather evidence. How? You give them what they expect, the compliant, easily manipulated daughter. You appear overwhelmed, maybe even a little confused. Let them believe their pressure is working. While they're gloating, we're building our case? Exactly. We need irrefutable evidence of the forgery, the financial transfers, and their harassment campaign. Over the next week, I implemented Maria's strategy. I called my mother, voice trembling, and apologized for my emotional reaction during the family visit. I told her I was feeling overwhelmed with work and the move, and maybe they were right that I needed help managing things. Of course you do, darling, she replied, satisfaction evident in her voice. Family knows best. We only want what's good for you. Meanwhile, Maria began the painstaking process of documenting the fraud. We hired a forensic accountant to trace the movement of funds from my grandmother's estate. We engaged a handwriting expert to analyze the forged signature. We filed formal complaints about the unauthorized entry to my apartment and the surveillance devices. Brett became an unexpected ally, using his corporate legal experience to help navigate the financial aspects of the case. We met regularly at a coffee shop far from my apartment, assuming my family was still monitoring my movements. "They've created a paper trail that would make most criminals cringe," he observed after reviewing the documents from Gregory. "They were so confident you'd never find out, they barely covered their tracks." To keep my family distracted, I began dropping subtle hints of wealth, mentioning investment opportunities during calls with my mother, scheduling viewings at expensive condos that I knew my family would somehow learn about, arranging meetings with financial advisors at prominent firms where I'd be seen. "Let them chase shadows," Maria advised. "Every hour they spend investigating your fake fortune is an hour they're not interfering with our case preparation." The strategy seemed to be working. My family's surveillance became less subtle as their greed overcame caution. Ryan coincidentally appeared at restaurants where I was dining. Jessica called frequently, with recommendations for exclusive investment groups that required significant buy-in. My father invited me to golf with his business associates, who might have opportunities for someone with your resources. I played my role perfectly, hesitant but increasingly open to their suggestions, asking naive questions about investment strategies, admitting I felt overwhelmed by managing substantial assets. Each conversation was recorded with their knowledge. I made a point of mentioning I was recording to remember their excellent advice, but also secretly with devices Maria provided that captured better quality. The guardianship hearing was approaching, and we needed to be prepared. My parents had submitted affidavits from family friends attesting to my erratic behavior and financial irresponsibility. They had even convinced my former supervisor from Boston to suggest I had been under stress before leaving. But we had our own evidence mounting. The forensic accountant had tracked the dispersal of my inheritance through various family accounts. The handwriting expert had definitively concluded the signature was forged. And most damning of all, we had recorded conversations of family members discussing the deception. The turning point came from an unexpected source. My cousin Courtney, who had been notably absent from the family visit, reached out with information that changed everything. "I've been avoiding the family for years," she explained when we met at a park well away from my apartment. "After what they did to me, I couldn't stomach being around them." "What did they do to you?" Her story was disturbingly familiar. Courtney had also been a beneficiary of our grandmother's estate, designated to receive valuable property in Vermont. Like me, she had never been notified. Unlike me, she had discovered the theft much earlier, confronted the family, and been systematically ostracized. "They destroyed my relationships, my career opportunities, everything," she said bitterly. "I didn't have the resources to fight them legally, so I walked away. Started over in Seattle under my mother's maiden name, but I've been watching, waiting. When I saw Melanie's disgusting GoFundMe about you, I knew they were doing it again." Courtney had something invaluable. Emails and text messages from family members discussing both our inheritances and the plan to keep us from claiming them. "Ryan was careless," she explained. "He used to forward family emails to my old address, not realizing I still had access. I have years of communications about both our situations. The evidence was damning. Messages explicitly discussing how to handle Hazel if she discovers the trust, contingency plans if I became difficult, and even discussions of the guardianship strategy long before their visit to my apartment." Armed with this new evidence, Maria felt confident enough to move from defense to offense. We filed our own court motion, not just to dismiss the guardianship petition, but to bring charges of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy against my parents, Ryan and Jessica. The morning we filed, I received a text from Amelia. "Your mother knows something's happening. She's been asking me nonstop if you've met with lawyers. I can't do this anymore, Hazel. I'm sorry for everything." I didn't respond. The damage to our friendship was irreparable, but her message confirmed we had caught them off guard. That evening, as I was reviewing documents with Brett in my apartment, which had been thoroughly swept for bugs, my phone lit up with a call from an unknown number. "Hazel Mitchell?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes? This is Detective Simmons with the Financial Crimes Division. We've received some concerning information regarding your family that we'd like to discuss. Are you available to come to the station tomorrow morning?" I looked at Brett, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes, I can be there. What exactly is this regarding?" Ma'am, the FBI has opened an investigation into your family's financial activities based on evidence submitted to our office. It appears the fraud involving your inheritance may be part of a larger pattern of financial crimes. After I hung up, Brett and I sat in stunned silence. Maria's court filing had triggered more than we'd anticipated. The Mitchell family's financial dealings were now under federal scrutiny. This is bigger than your inheritance, Brett said finally. Much bigger. That night, my phone exploded with messages from family members, panicked, angry, threatening. I silenced it and for the first time in months, slept peacefully. The tables had finally turned. The next morning, as I prepared to meet with the detective, I received one last message from my father. This can still be resolved within the family. Don't destroy everything for money you don't need. Think carefully about what you're doing, Hazel. I did think carefully. About my grandmother's letter, about years of being invisible, about their willingness to have me declared incompetent rather than return what was rightfully mine, about the lengths they had gone to maintain control. My response was simple: see you in court. The family gathering was my idea. One final opportunity to resolve matters before the courtroom. Maria advised against it, concerned about potential manipulation. But I insisted. I needed to face them directly, on my terms, in my space. Just remember, she cautioned, everything they say can and should be used against them. Don't let emotion override strategy. I chose a Saturday afternoon, knowing none of them could claim work conflicts. My apartment was prepared. Digital recorders hidden throughout, legally questionable, Maria admitted, but potentially valuable for negotiation. Copies of key documents strategically placed where they would be visible, and Brett in the building on standby. They arrived in waves, my parents first, expressions severe. Ryan and Jessica next, both avoiding eye contact. Tyler looking genuinely confused, Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert hovering awkwardly in the hallway. Various cousins and spouses filing in silently. Thank you all for coming. I began once everyone was seated uncomfortably in my living room. I thought we should discuss the situation privately before the courts become further involved. Sensible, my father said, attempting to take control of the conversation. Family matters should remain within the family. I agree, I replied, noting how he straightened slightly, mistaking my comment for capitulation. So let's start with family matters, specifically, Grandma Sarah's estate and the $2 million that was meant for me. The room tensed immediately. My mother's smile became rigid. Hazel, darling, I think there's been some confusion. Your grandmother's estate was modest at best and distributed years ago. That's interesting, because I have the official estate documents right here. I gestured to the folder on my coffee table. They show a total value of $12 million, with $2 million specifically designated for me. My father cleared his throat. Gregory Winters has always been somewhat disorganized. Those documents are clearly preliminary drafts, not final distributions. I also have the banking records showing the transfer of my portion to Mitchell Family Holdings. I placed another folder on the table, and forensic accounting tracing how those funds were subsequently dispersed among various family accounts. Ryan snorted dismissively. This is ridiculous. You're talking about routine family financial management. Management of money that wasn't yours to manage, I countered. Money that was legally mine, distributed using documents bearing a forged signature. Forged, my mother exclaimed with perfect indignation. Hazel, these accusations are exactly why we're concerned about your mental state. You signed those documents yourself. I watched you. Did you? Let's examine the signature. I opened a third folder containing the expert analysis. The handwriting expert has identified 14 distinct discrepancies between this signature and my legal signature. The notary, whose stamp appears on the document, has provided a statement that she has no record of notarizing this document and believes her stamp was used fraudulently. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. My father's expression hardened from dismissive to calculating. What exactly are you hoping to accomplish with these theories? He asked. Justice. Return of my inheritance with interest. Acknowledgement of what was done to me, and destroy the family in the process? My mother's voice rose dramatically. After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me? Ignored me my entire life? Excluded me from family events? Stolen my inheritance? Tried to have me declared mentally incompetent? We were protecting you from yourself, Jessica interjected. You've always been emotionally unstable, Hazel. Unable to handle stress or responsibility. Is that the story you all agreed on? That I'm too unstable to manage my own money, but somehow functional enough to hold a successful career and live independently? The conversation devolved quickly after that. Accusations, counter-accusations, family members taking sides or trying to distance themselves from the controversy. I have no idea what any of this is about, Tyler claimed, wide-eyed. I was never involved in any financial decisions. You cashed a check for $80,000 from Mitchell Family Holdings last year, I informed him. The memo line read, Hazel's trust portion. Want to explain that? Tyler paled and looked to our father for help. My father stood, attempting to regain control. Enough of this circus. Hazel, your grandmother's estate was complex. Decisions were made for tax purposes, for family security. Perhaps there were administrative oversights that can be corrected. But these wild accusations of conspiracy and fraud are exactly why we're concerned about your judgment. Administrative oversights? Is that what we're calling forgery and theft now? Ryan stepped forward, his expression darkening. You have no idea what you're doing. The family's reputation, our business connections. You're putting everything at risk over money. This isn't about money, I replied. This is about respect, about being treated as a full member of this family. Not an afterthought you can steal from with impunity. Steal? We invested your portion for your benefit. My mother was nearly shouting now. You were in no position to manage that kind of money. Then why wasn't I informed? Why was I never consulted about these investments? Why have I never seen a cent of return? The room fell silent as everyone realized she had just inadvertently admitted knowledge of the money. My father's eyes narrowed dangerously. Diane, that's enough. He turned to me. Hazel, I'll be blunt. This can still be resolved privately. We can arrange for a reasonable settlement to avoid embarrassing public proceedings. After you tried to have me declared incompetent? After you bugged my apartment and sent people to search through my things? After you interfered with my job and turned my friend against me? You think a reasonable settlement fixes that? His mask slipped momentarily, revealing cold fury before he regained composure. Those are more delusions. You have no proof of such melodramatic claims. I walked to my bookshelf and removed the 3 listening devices that had been planted during their visit. These were found by building security. The surveillance was reported to the police. The cleaning service your mother hired has provided a statement confirming they were instructed to tidy up and check for important documents. Jessica stood abruptly. This is insane. I'm not sitting here listening to more of these paranoid accusations. She grabbed her purse, but in her haste, knocked it over, spilling the contents. Among the scattered items was a small recording device identical to the ones I'd found in my apartment. The room froze as she hurriedly scooped it up, her face flushing. Were you recording this conversation, Jessica? I asked quietly. Of course not. It's just a voice memo device. For shopping lists, with a 16-hour battery life and remote activation capability, that's quite sophisticated for shopping lists. The tension was palpable as everyone realized the implications. They had come prepared to gather more evidence against me while denying their own surveillance. Aunt Patricia, who had remained unusually quiet, finally spoke. Hazel, dear, I think things have gotten out of hand. No one meant any harm. Family sometimes makes mistakes in trying to protect each other. Protect? Is that what you call it? You knew about my inheritance from the beginning, Patricia. You were the executor's contact when I was unreachable. You verified my address as being my parents' home when you knew I lived elsewhere. Patricia's carefully composed expression crumbled. I did what Lawrence asked. Family loyalty. Patricia, my father interrupted sharply. That's not helpful, but the damage was done. Patricia's admission had confirmed another piece of the conspiracy. This meeting is over, my father announced. Clearly, Hazel is not interested in reasonable discussion. Our attorneys will handle this matter from now on. Before you go, I said, you should know a few things. First, this entire conversation has been legally recorded as evidence for the upcoming proceedings. Second, The FBI has opened an investigation into Mitchell family holdings for a pattern of financial fraud extending beyond my inheritance. And third, I paused, making eye contact with each family member. I have submitted DNA evidence to verify my identity in relation to Grandma Sarah's estate. I suggest you all do the same. The last part was a bluff. There was no DNA testing requirement. But the panic that flashed across my father's face suggested there might be even more secrets than I'd discovered. As they filed out, hurling final threats and pleas, my mother lingered behind. "You've made a terrible mistake, Hazel," she said quietly. "This family protected you, carried you. Without us, who are you?" I considered her question carefully before answering. "I'm Sarah Mitchell's granddaughter. I'm the woman who uncovered your fraud. I'm the person who finally stopped seeking your approval and started demanding respect instead. That's who I am without you. And it turns out, I like her much better than the daughter you ignored." She flinched as if I'd struck her, then composed herself and walked out without another word. Brett found me sitting alone in my apartment afterward, surrounded by the scattered evidence of my family's betrayal. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Lighter?" I replied, surprising myself with the truth of it. Like I've put down something heavy I've been carrying my whole life. The war wasn't over. Court proceedings would drag on, investigations would continue, family members would try to rally support against me. But for the first time, I wasn't fighting for their acceptance or approval. I was fighting for justice, for myself, for the truth. And that made all the difference. The legal proceedings unfolded over 18 grueling months. The family guardianship petition was dismissed almost immediately once our evidence was presented. But the fight for my inheritance became a complex web of financial forensics, legal maneuvering, and emotional warfare. My family fought back with every resource at their disposal. They hired prestigious law firms, planted stories with friendly journalists, suggesting I was pursuing a vendetta against generous parents, and attempted to freeze assets to prevent my recovery of funds. They even tried to pressure Gregory Winters into retracting his testimony, forcing him to choose between his ethical obligations and decades of lucrative family business. To their surprise, he chose ethics. "I've represented the Mitchell family for 30 years, he testified. "But I cannot and will not be party to defrauding a rightful heir." His testimony was devastating to their case, providing insider confirmation of the deliberate nature of the deception. The FBI investigation expanded beyond my inheritance, uncovering a pattern of financial manipulations within Mitchell family holdings that had implications for business partners, investors, and even distant relatives. My father and Ryan faced separate federal charges for wire fraud and tax evasion related to these discoveries. Throughout the ordeal, my family maintained a united public front, presenting themselves as victims of my irrational vendetta. But privately, cracks appeared. Tyler reached out secretly, offering to testify about conversations he'd overheard in exchange for immunity. Jessica's husband filed for divorce, unwilling to be dragged down by the Mitchell family legal troubles. Even my mother began distancing herself from my father's financial decisions, carefully reconstructing her narrative as an uninformed spouse rather than an active participant. The settlement, when it finally came, was comprehensive. I received my full inheritance plus accumulated interest, additional damages for the fraudulent activity, and legal costs. The total approached $3 million, more money than I'd ever imagined possessing. But the true value wasn't financial. It was the freedom that came with it. Freedom from seeking approval, from doubting my worth, from the subtle manipulations that had shaped my life for 28 years. I used part of the settlement to move again. Not out of fear this time, but to create a fresh start truly my own. I found a charming townhouse in a quieter neighborhood with a garden, terrace, and space for the home office I needed for my new venture. Because that was the other change, leaving corporate marketing to start my own consulting firm specializing in helping small businesses owned by women. The irony wasn't lost on me that my family's money, which they had worked so hard to keep from me, was now funding a business dedicated to empowering others. Cutting ties with toxic family members was both painful and liberating. I maintained minimal contact with Tyler, who seemed genuinely remorseful about his role and was working to establish independence from our parents. I reconnected with Courtney, my fellow disinherited cousin, who became both a friend and occasional business collaborator. We shared a bond forged through similar wounds and parallel healing. The hardest relationships to relinquish were the imaginary ones, the loving parents I'd always hoped for, the supportive siblings I'd never had. Therapy helped me grieve these losses and recognize that my longing for family approval had been a powerful lever they'd used to control me. Your worth was never determined by their assessment, my therapist reminded me regularly. Their inability to see your value reflects their limitations, not yours. Brett remained a steadfast presence throughout the process, our relationship evolving from neighbors to friends to something deeper. He understood family complexity, having navigated his own difficult dynamics, and never minimized my experiences or suggested I should just move on before I was ready. I built a chosen family around me: Brett, Courtney, colleagues who became friends, neighbors who shared meals and holidays. People who chose to be in my life rather than those connected only by obligation or DNA. My apartment became a home filled with gatherings, laughter, and honest conversations. I started hosting monthly dinners where everyone contributed something to the meal, a tradition that felt healing after years of performative family events where appearance mattered more than connection. 6 months after the settlement, my mother reached out. She arrived at my new home bearing gifts and remorse, having separated from my father as his legal troubles mounted. "I've done a lot of thinking," she said, perched uncomfortably on my sofa, "about the kind of mother I was. The kind of person I've been." I waited, neither accepting nor rejecting her tentative olive branch. I was raised to value certain things: status, appearances, financial security. I thought I was giving you children advantages by prioritizing those things. She looked around my modest but comfortable home. "But you've built something real here, something I never managed despite all my striving." "What do you want, Mom?" I asked finally. "A chance," she said simply. "Not forgiveness yet. I haven't earned that. Just a chance to know the daughter I never took the time to understand." I didn't offer immediate reconciliation. Instead, I suggested something more basic: honesty. We agreed to monthly coffees where difficult questions could be asked and truthfully answered. It wasn't a Hollywood reunion, but it was a beginning anchored in reality rather than pretense. Some relationships couldn't and shouldn't be salvaged. My father, facing federal charges and civil lawsuits, remained unrepentant. Ryan, following our father's example, refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing. Jessica maintained a carefully curated social media presence that excluded any mention of family difficulties or my existence. Their absence created space for healthier connections. I discovered that without the constant pressure to conform to family expectations, I had energy to nurture friendships, explore interests I'd previously abandoned, and develop parts of myself long suppressed. On the anniversary of filing my lawsuit, Brett and I hosted a dinner for the people who had supported me throughout the ordeal: Maria, Courtney, colleagues who had stood by me despite my family's interference, neighbors who had watched my apartment when I feared intrusion. "I'd like to make a toast," I said as we gathered around my dining table. "Not to the money, which is nice, but ultimately just money. Not to winning, because viewing life as a contest to be won was my family's mistake. But to truth, to living honestly, to being seen clearly, and to surrounding yourself with people who value authenticity over appearance." As glasses clinked and conversations flowed, I felt a profound sense of peace. My life wasn't perfect, no life is, but it was authentically mine, not defined by family expectations or limitations, not measured against siblings' achievements, not constrained by others' assessments of my worth. My grandmother's letter had promised that the inheritance came with no strings, no expectations, only my hope that it helps you build the life you choose, not the one others choose for you. It had taken a battle I never wanted to claim that freedom, but the result was exactly what she had wished for me. The journey from being the forgotten, invisible Mitchell daughter to becoming simply Hazel, a woman standing in her own power, creating her own definitions of success and family, had been painful but necessary. The inheritance that mattered most wasn't the money, but the self-knowledge that came from finally fighting for what was rightfully mine. Not just financial resources, but respect, truth, and the right to chart my own course. I realized that my life had improved immeasurably, not when I gained wealth, but when I stopped seeking validation from those who could never truly see me. And in that hard-won wisdom, I found something my family, with all their money and connections, had never managed to secure: genuine contentment. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up to family who couldn't see your true worth? Or had to create boundaries with toxic relatives? Drop a comment below and share your experience. Your story might help someone else feeling invisible in their own family. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories, and share with someone who might need to hear that they deserve better. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the family we choose is more valuable than the family we're born into.